Hi, this is Chris Young, and welcome to Good News on Tap for the 27th Sunday in Ordinary Time. A lot of times it's hard to see a consistent theme through all of the scripture readings on any given day, but today it seems like the message is really clear. All of today's scripture readings are about having patience. We start out with the first reading, which is a vision that the prophet Habakkuk had. In his vision, he sees violence and all sorts of evil in the world. And he pleads with God, why do I have to look at all this violence and destruction? Now, the first half of the reading is just 2 verses from chapter 1 of Habakkuk. Then it skips all the way to chapter 2, in which the prophet gets his answer. The answer is that God tells him to write down his vision so that it can be read plainly. God says, the vision still has its time. Basically what he's saying is, be patient. You haven't seen the end yet. There's still time for this story to play out. And in fact, if people read the story, they may change their ways. In the second reading, Paul is in prison, which would naturally be a very depressing situation. And he realizes that others are being persecuted, and they're probably discouraged not only by their own situation, but by his imprisonment as well. He tries to get them fired up. Don't be ashamed of your faith, or be ashamed of him being a prisoner, but to bear the hardships of the gospel with the strength that comes from God. It had to be a very discouraging time to be a Christian when people were being persecuted for their faith. They had to wonder if things were ever going to get better. And Paul is reminding them that God didn't call them to be cowards, but he gave them the gift of strength. In the Gospels, the apostles plead, increase our faith. Well, Jesus tells them if they had faith, there would be many miracles they could perform. And then he delivers a parable about a servant and a master. Now that parable may seem a little strange to us, so let's retell the story as we might tell it today. Suppose you had a large factory, and at the end of some work day, you pick out one of the assembly line laborers, invite them up to the top floor of the headquarters to the corporate suites. There you'd serve them cocktails and a fancy dinner. Would you do that? Of course not. On the other hand, if you had an exceptionally skilled worker who proved their worth to the company, they might become a supervisor, and then a mid-level manager, and so on up the ladder. And it's even feasible to think that someday they might rise up the chain of command to become upper-level management, or vice president, or even CEO of the company. Many successful CEOs today of our largest companies started out in the most menial jobs. And there's a philosophy that says that's the best way to make a good leader, is to have them learn the business literally from the ground up. So Jesus is in effect saying, you're not ready for the kind of faith that can uproot trees or move mountains or perform other great miracles. Why? Because you haven't put in the time yet. You haven't done the work. Literally, you haven't done all that's been commanded of you. You've probably seen that motivational poster that says something like, God made me and God don't make junk. Well, that's true, but we also need to keep in mind that God is still making us. We aren't finished yet. We still have a ways to go on the journey, and until we can really say that we've done all that has been commanded of us, as Jesus said today, then we really can't complain about our circumstances. We should not be impatient with either ourselves, our own situation, or with the world. Finally, the psalm this week is encouraging the people to sing joyfully to the Lord, and not be like it was at Meribah and the day of Massah. That's a reference to the days when the chosen people were complaining against God that he wasn't doing enough for them, tempting him to do miracles for them. They were complaining despite the fact that they had seen all that God had done for them, freeing them from slavery and sending them towards the promised land. So it's pretty clear throughout all of our readings this week that the consistent message is, We need to be patient, to stay the course, as the saying goes. We just need to bide our time and do what God's asked us to do. As long as we remember all that God has done for us, and as long as we continue to do what He asks, things will turn out okay in the end. God isn't done with us yet. So as the psalm refrain says, if today you hear His voice, harden not your hearts. And that's Good News on Tap for the 27th Sunday of Ordinary Time.